If you were a good jungler a few patches ago, well, surprise, you aren't anymore. At least, not yet. Probably. Riot loves to change the jungle and make us relearn it every single year. But this time, we essentially got a complete rework 3 times in the span of a few months. It really seems like they can't make up their minds about how they want the role to be balanced, but to be fair, I can't blame them. I don't really know what the solution is either. At the very least, we can teach you all how to get a read on the meta and actually adapt to these changes, and any further ones that will inevitably happen down the line. But before we get to that, let's actually address the problem with the old jungle meta and what Riot is doing and has done to try and fix it. Basically, jungle was almost impossible to get a lead in. It wasn't so much that you couldn't establish a lead in the first place, but it would essentially evaporate the second you looked away for even a second. We can find many situations where you would expect one player to be getting absolutely stomped. For example, this game with Graves versus Warwick. Graves is over double Warwick's CS and has over 4 times the amount of kill participation. By any metric of success, he's hard winning. But just look at the levels. They're literally the exact same. I don't think it's unreasonable to say that this feels terrible for jungler. There's absolutely no shortage of examples of this exact kind of thing happening either. And I feel like I speak for all players when I say that if you get ahead, you deserve to feel like you actually are. Outplaying your opponent the entire game only to constantly be the same level is pretty disheartening and not great for player satisfaction or any playstyle that wants to play for individual agency. In the past, we've had jungle metas where it was hard gated by your clear speed. Camps would respawn quickly, and in order to keep pace, you would have to be able to farm. Ganks simply would not give you enough XP when compared to someone that was just power farming their camps. And if you fell behind, you would never catch up. Pro players really do try to do the most efficient thing for the meta. And even in metas where ganking junglers would find great success in solo queue, they would likely just be full clearing in pro, even on the same champs like Jarvan that had good ganks. The reason for this is that ganks just had way too much risk and simply not enough payout. Pro players really just wouldn't die to ganks very often. Since both junglers were tracking each other well and vision was coordinated, anyone that went to go for an early gank was essentially just throwing a Hail Mary. It wasn't consistent at all to early gank, at least not at the pro level. But this year, something has really shifted, making pro play look a lot more like solo queue. Let's take for example this one full night of LCK games. All of them were played back to back, so we're not cherry picking any examples here. In every single game, at least one of the junglers rushed level 3 and just ran around. Whether it was to invade, gank a lane, or in the most egregious case, just sit around and wait for a crab to spawn, in all of these cases they could have been doing camps, but simply didn't care to. Not because they're making mistakes, but because it just didn't matter all that much if they farmed efficiently or not. Spam ganking and running around to invade was by far the most efficient playstyle in pro play. And if that was the case in competitive, where the ganks were the absolute hardest to pull off, you'd probably assume that it's even better in solo queue, where the ganks are easy. And you are 100% correct in that assumption. If you were a good jungler a few patches ago, you were most assuredly doing something very similar to this in order to impact the map. After all, if you can't play for an individual lead, then it's best just to play to get your teammates ahead and punish the laner, not the other jungler. A few mechanics compounded to make this more true than it ever has been. The addition of treats for junglers allows you to gain gold value even while not farming, and cash out on it later down the line. This means you're punished less on the gold end of the spectrum for potentially wasting time, like if you're killed and you can't farm for a bit. In addition to this, kill comeback experience is absurd, so that even if you were really far behind, the second you participate in any kill, you're instantly rewarded and catapulted ahead. Even just being 1 level down on a laner, a super common occurrence for junglers, would reward you with a huge % increase in experience. This made the reward for ganking go up by a huge margin and increased your risk tolerance by a lot. On top of this, jungle camps reward you for being under-leveled as well, giving you 50 experience per level you are below the average. A lot of players don't actually know if this is a lot or not, so for comparison's sake, this is about half the value of a camp. For something like Raptors, it's more than half, meaning that if you're 2 or 3 levels down, you're effectively getting 2 camps for the price of doing 1. In patch 11.10, when this was added, Phalaris did a great job of researching to figure out exactly how this worked. The first clause specifying that you need to be 2 levels down on the average level of the game might seem extreme at first, but it's important to realize that the average level of the game never actually rounds down. For example, the average level of the game could be 9.1, and you would expect that to count as 9, but it actually rounds up to 10. This means that getting the 2 level down requirement isn't all that rare at all. You just have to be level 8 in a game where most people are level 8 and 9, and maybe some of the solo laners are level 10 or at most 11. That's probably going to happen pretty much every game. Because of this, the game is designed to keep you at the level of your bot laners essentially. And while it's really easy to get XP from behind, it's super hard to get it from ahead. Not only do all of these bonuses drop off once you're even, you also get reduced XP from lane minions for the entire game, which was supposed to be removed once your jungle item finished. But once again, Flores figured out that the patch notes were incorrect and the game doesn't really work how they say it does. When you combine all these factors together, there really exists a ceiling for how far ahead junglers can get, and the floor is pretty much right below it. This made the risk for practically ganking nonstop almost zero, and the reward was huge. Not only would you get massive amounts of gold through shutdown bounties and treasure hunter, you get to punish the people that, would actually fall behind and stay behind, laners. If we need to visualize how to determine if we're in a farming or ganking meta, what we're really doing is assessing the risk tolerance that we have with regards to ganking. Basically, think of it as a scale like this. If we're looking at a gank and can evaluate that it's pretty much just as likely to work as it is to fail, we can throw it right in the middle of this scale. But deciding if we go for it or not really depends on our risk tolerance or threshold for ganking. In a meta like 13.2, your risk tolerance would be really high, meaning that you would only not go for the gank if it was super unlikely to work. Maybe just the bottom quarter wouldn't be attempted. In a meta where power farming is really strong, your risk tolerance will be really low, meaning that unless the gank is super likely to work, you wouldn't even bother, i.e. if it's 75% or better, you would probably try it. It might be the exact same gank you were looking at, but the threshold changes based on the meta and the systems in place. In the past, when a very extreme jungle meta existed, you didn't really have to think super hard. 13.2, you could just spam gank and you were going to be right 75% of the time or more. 2 years ago, you could power farm and you'd be right about 75% of the time as well. Unfortunately for us, this system is constantly changing, and every time there's a patch that affects experience or gold gain for junglers, your threshold is going to need to adapt. Because Riot really doesn't seem to want either extreme to flourish, they attempted to push the needle into the middle with a few big adjustments on patch 13.4, namely that catch-up kill XP and kill experience is being reduced, especially in the cases that would help junglers most often, which is 1 and 2 level differentials and kills early on from levels 3 to 10. From patch 13.3, we also received a few adjustments to disincentivize ganking, like the reduction of treat gold, the increase in camp experience, the reduction of warding totem cooldown, and an increase in early tower damage to help stop dives. And in patch 13.5, we received additional adjustments that are going to swing the needle again. On top of a decrease in warding totem cooldown, we're now getting an early increase to the cooldown of sweeping lens, which basically translates to more wards and less ability to clear them. More simply put, this is a nerf to gank success rate. Additionally, something that was added in preseason, a hidden damage nerf against enemy camps, is being removed entirely, and we're getting a nerf to the amount of lane experience that you can soak as a jungler. The intention behind this is to increase the punishment for showing on map, i.e. ganking. If you gank bottom and someone goes to your top side, Riot wants that to actually matter. Not only can they take your camps faster, they're also going to be rewarded more. All of the camps are getting an increase in gold, 10 per camp average. So we are getting a bit of an increase to overall gold generation in jungle at the sacrifice of a lot of sources of experience. You can't just get all of your XP from ganking and pushing the wave after. Not only are your ganks less likely to even work in the first place due to trinket changes and tower damage changes, but now you're getting 35% less experience at the early levels, which is huge to say the least. Catch-up XP from camps does still exist, but overall, this is going to try and make both playstyles be viable. It does mean that we just have to be much more conscious about picking the right option now, gank or farm, and not just defaulting to one or the other. If we're right and the threshold for ganking lands in the middle, now more than ever, we have to be able to analyze the risk tolerance and actual risk of a gank so that we don't just end up wasting all of our time. With each new jungle patch, we will of course update everyone where we think the needle will land. But if you want to take advantage of the chaos and outperform your peers right away, then being able to estimate where your risk tolerance should be with each patch the day of is crucial. This skill is essentially your ability to read the changes in the meta. You should try to have a mental image of where the line where you do and don't go for ganks exists. And aside from that, the other most important tool for adapting to any new meta is to be able to accurately predict if a gank is going to work or not. In these metas where the needle is in the middle, this is the most important skill you can develop. And there are a few general ideas you can use in order to improve at this. One of the best skills to master is reading your opponent's body language, I've made multiple full-length guides on this over at our website, and if you want a more in-depth guide on how to do this, I definitely recommend watching those. It basically just lets you read your opponent's minds and tells you exactly what they're going to do next. Aside from this, there are 3 other main ideas that you use when calculating the risk of any gank. 1, the wave state, 2, the resources available, and 3, the gank angle. Wave state basically means where the wave is currently and where it's going to end up. A wave that is pushing back into you is going to be much easier to gank on than a wave that is pushing away, for example, except in the case of a dive where you actually do want the wave to crash. If you can't read a wave and predict what it will do, it's going to be very hard to actually gauge a gank success rate. This is another complicated topic that we have also made full guides on, so we're not going to go super deep into it here. However, this does segue well into the next point. Resources includes a lot of things. One of the biggest being health. A wave pushing into the opponent's tower at full health is much different than when they're at 10% and will be killed by a light breeze. Someone being low HP makes ganks much more likely to work, and as much as this matters, so does their summoner spells and regular abilities as well. Ganking someone who you know has no flash, ultimate, or escape ability all impacts this very heavily and should definitely weigh into your decision making. For both these points, this is why high elo players and coaches will always harp on players for not moving their camera to lanes and just using their minimap. It's simply not enough to only see icons on the map when you need so much more information to actually decide what to do next. If you're having problems, this is the first thing that I would look at. Good camera control will also help you spot when your enemies move to place wards. If you know exactly where a ward is, you can go around it. And not being spotted is one of the easiest ways to improve your odds. Do you have sweeper up and can verify you haven't been seen? Do you have a pink in the bush on the way? Do you have a blast cone that makes a really creative gank angle possible? Can you get behind your opponent to cut off their escape? Or are you running at them head on? Do you know where the enemy team is? Will you get counter ganked? This is a huge list of questions, but they're all good questions to ask. Ultimately, understanding if you can make a gank happen is both parts experience and learned knowledge. You need to have a feel for your champion's damage, move speed, how tanky your opponents are, their abilities, and these are all variables that are going to heavily change every single game. There is no 100% guaranteed way to say if a gank will work or not, but the more thorough you are with your thought process and reasoning before committing to anything, the better your decision making is going to be. We don't even really know where the ideal risk tolerance is going to be on this patch yet, but understanding how metas impact our decisions as well as how to accurately evaluate risks of a gank let us have confidence that we can succeed regardless of how OP jungle is or isn't on any given patch. Because this is the role that can impact lanes the most while simultaneously being a carry role in itself, you will always have insanely high impact in the game, regardless of the meta. If you find yourself being unable to carry like you did on a different patch, it's quite possible that you just haven't adapted your risk tolerance to match what the game calls for. And if you found this guide useful, then you'll absolutely love our hyper improvement platform at skillcap.com. We take the highest priority skills you need to learn to climb ranks fast, such as wave control, and then break it down into a step-by-step course of bite-sized 1 to 2 minute videos that are easy to understand. So while you wait for your next game to start, you can learn freezing, fast pushing, slow pushing, bouncing waves, the list goes on, all in just a few minutes to maximize your improvement rate. These courses have been getting 5-star ratings from all of our users, raving at how helpful they are. That's not all though, as every week we release 10 brand new Smurf commentaries where a challenger player teaches you how to climb out of the exact rank you're stuck in. If you're looking for something more personal instead, then we've got you covered with one-on-one coaching from our trained challenger experts. All of this seems too good to be true? Well, don't worry. We're backed by a rank up guarantee. If you don't significantly improve while actively using skill caps, then you get your money back, no questions asked. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description below and get the rank you've always wanted. We here at Skill Caps want to thank you for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.